When my son told me he couldn't come to the hospital on the night I almost died because he was busy throwing a birthday party for Melissa, I felt sadness, disappointment, and I knew I had to act to reclaim my dignity. I would rewrite my will and leave them a sum they would never expect. The steady beeping of the heart monitor pulled me back from a bottomless dark. My eyelids were heavy as stone, and when I forced them open, the fluorescent lights stabbed at my temples like pins. "Mr. Coleman, can you hear me? Rick?" A woman's voice, gentle but steady. My throat burned as if I had swallowed gravel. "Where am I?" "You're at Baylor University Medical Center. You had a myocardial infarction last night." She leaned into view, her badge catching the light. Carla Nguyen, RN. Behind thin wire frames, her eyes were kind and clear. Myocardial infarction. Each word dropped heavy, like a sentence. A doctor appeared, young but with a weary face. A stethoscope hung around his neck like a medal he wasn't yet sure he deserved. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Dr. Price. We've stabilized you. The damage is significant, but you're still with us, and we'll need to watch you closely." I nodded, though every small movement sent a stab of pain through my chest. "How long have I been here?" "Since last evening. EMS brought you in around 7 o'clock. The last thing I remembered was Monday morning, stepping out of my house in Plano, planning to stop at the hardware store for a box of nails. After that, nothing." Dr. Price studied my chart, then looked at me, his voice careful. "Do you have family we should notify?" My chest tightened. Not from the bad heart, but from something heavier. My son, Daniel Coleman. He lives in Uptown, with his wife Melissa. "We called him last night," the doctor said, shifting a little, as if uneasy with the truth. My heart rate jumped. The machine beeped faster. "And?" His eyes flicked to the nurse, then back. "I explained your condition. I told him you might not make it through the night." He said, "He was busy. Yesterday was Melissa's birthday." For a long moment I thought I'd misheard. Maybe the medicine had made my ears ring. "Busy?" I rasped. The doctor lowered his voice. "I've made hundreds of calls like that. Most families drop everything and come running. But your son?" He let the sentence fall away. Carla adjusted a line, pretending not to hear, but I caught the pity in her eyes. I swallowed hard, throat dry as dust. The boy I had raised, the one I had carried through every bend in the road, couldn't set aside one evening when his father was close to death. That night, lying in the ICU, I replayed the years. Every sacrifice, stacked like bricks in a wall. Daniel's tuition at the University of Texas. $60,000 gnawed away at my retirement, like termites in old wood. Melissa's first law office. $20,000 loaned with no thought of repayment. Their uptown Dallas apartment. The deposit came from me. The polished hardwood floors, the marble counters. Every visit left me feeling like a stranger in the house I helped build. Every dollar, every errand on the weekends, every sure I can cover that without hesitation. And when I needed just one thing, their presence, they were busy. Busy, celebrating. I stared into the darkness of the room, listened to the soft machinery, and knew something had changed forever. For 70 years, I had been the reliable one. The bridge builder, at work and at home. But even bridges collapse when no one maintains them. My bridge had broken. I left the hospital a week later. My heart was weak, my legs still shaky, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. Sometimes you have to stand on the edge to see how far you've gone and what you've lost. I sat in the sunlit living room of my small house in Plano, Texas, and let the memories come. When Daniel got his acceptance letter to the University of Texas, he burst through the door, eyes shining like he'd been handed the keys to the world. "Dad, I got in. UT Austin." Can you believe it? I could believe it. From the time he was a boy, I'd seen the spark, intelligence, stubbornness, ambition. What was harder to believe was the tuition, $60,000 for 4 years. At the time, I'd been a civil engineer for more than 30 years. The salary was steady, enough to live and set aside a little. But that tuition meant shelving the dream of early retirement, forgetting the hunting trips to Montana, the RV road trip across America my late wife and I once dreamed of. Still, when I saw the fire in my boy's face, I could only nod. I'll take care of it. And I did. I picked up extra consulting jobs, spent weekends auditing design files for a small firm. There were nights I stumbled home at 11, clothes reeking of asphalt and dust. I told myself, just 4 years. Daniel graduated on time with a degree in marketing. I sat in the crowd on commencement day, clapping until my palms burned, pride swelling in my chest. But I also knew another truth. My retirement had been pushed back by another decade. Then came the wedding. Melissa swept into Daniel's life like a sudden wind. Sharp, ambitious, working at a small law firm, but clearly reaching for more. The first time Daniel brought her home, I could see the hunger in her eyes. She wanted the world. "Dad, you only get married once," Daniel said as he slid the budget across the table. "I want it to be perfect. $15,000 for 1 day." The numbers choked me, but in the end, I signed the check. Parents are supposed to stand behind their children. The wedding was dazzling. Gold lights, wine flowing, sparklers showering down. I remember sitting at a distant table, watching my son and new daughter-in-law smile through the haze of cold fireworks. I smiled too. But in my pocket, my credit card was glowing hot. Melissa didn't stop there. 2 years later she said, "Dad, if I had a little help to start my own practice, I could build something. It's my dream. $20,000. I told myself it was a loan. Years passed, not a penny repaid, not even a proper thank you. Then came the uptown Dallas apartment, where they boasted of the skyline view, the polished wood floors, the marble counters. Who paid the deposit? I did. Who covered the bank when times got tight? I did. Each visit, I'd stand in the middle of that glossy living room, feeling like a guest in a story I'd paid to write. I remembered every time Daniel stumbled, losing his first job. I covered $3,000. His BMW's transmission failed. I handed him $1,500. Melissa lost her first case. "The account's empty," they said, and I transferred more. On and on it went. I became their safety net, their personal bank, an old man always there. But that night, lying in the hospital bed, wires taped to my skin, waiting for the sound of familiar footsteps, my son said he was busy. Busy. Throwing a birthday party for Melissa. I poured myself a cup of hot tea, my hand trembling, but my eyes sharp. The years of sacrifice, every number, every favor, every erased dream of retirement, had all boiled down to 2 words. I'm busy. And in that sunlit living room, I decided, not another dime, not ever again. During my days of recovery at Baylor, I realized I wasn't alone. It wasn't just my heart that carried scars, or my family that had turned its back. All around me, in those hospital rooms, were stories that echoed my own. Parents who had given everything, children who walked away. That morning, Nurse Carla steadied me as I inched down the hall. Every step felt like someone pressing a weight on my chest, but I forced myself forward. The wall clock showed nearly 8 in the morning. Texas sunlight streamed through the tall windows, spilling into rooms with a glow that was equal parts harsh and comforting. "You're doing great, Mr. Coleman," Carla said kindly. As we passed room 312, a rough voice called out, "New guy, huh? Looks like you just slipped past the Reaper, same as me." I stopped, clutching the walker, and turned. Inside was a gaunt old man, wisps of white hair falling across his forehead, face drawn but eyes still sharp. On the bedside table sat a wilted vase of yellow mums and a card with 2 words scrawled across it. "Sorry, Dad." I'm Rick, I said, catching my breath. And you are? Harvey Long. 72. He gave a dry chuckle. Calling this a laugh is generous. My face probably looks like a rotten board. Carla nodded, signaling that I could rest a moment. I shuffled into the room. Harvey tapped the card on the table. My son left me this, along with an empty savings account, $40,000, gone. He said he needed capital to start a business, took the money and vanished, left a card instead of his presence. My chest ached. Not sure if it was the damaged heart or the recognition. I exhaled slowly. Do you have any other family? Not really, Harvey said, eyes drifting toward the window. Since my wife passed, I poured everything into him, and I raised him into the kind of man who treats his father like an ATM. He turned back, pinning me with that tired but knowing gaze. You've got your own story, don't you? I stayed silent. In Harvey's eyes, I saw my reflection. That afternoon, Carla wheeled me to the small hospital garden, a quiet spot, stone benches shaded by rose bushes, pushing out blossoms in the hot Dallas sun. There, I met an older woman with cropped silver hair, a thin blanket wrapped around her shoulders. This is Evelyn Brooks, Carla introduced. She had gallbladder surgery last week. Evelyn smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. Heart trouble for you? I nodded. Almost didn't make it. Same here, she said slowly. But the worst pain isn't in here. She touched her chest, then shook her head. It's somewhere else. Your children? I asked without thinking. Her gaze locked on mine, clouded with age but lit with hurt. Yes, my daughter. I gave her 30 years. Raised her, paid for school, babysat her kids. When it was my turn, when I needed her, she said she was too busy with work, couldn't take the time. Her voice trembled. I lay in that operating room thinking I might not wake up, and she was probably sipping coffee at the office, laughing with co-workers. My whole life felt erased. The only words I could find were, I understand. Evelyn's hands tightened on the blanket. I changed my will. All of it goes to the church now. At least they'll use it to help someone. My daughter will get $1, just one. To remind her I didn't forget, but I also didn't forgive. Her words pierced like a blade. I saw Agnes, my late wife, in her weary face, and I saw myself, walking toward the same ending. That night, back in my room, Dallas streetlights cast their glow across the floor. The heart monitor ticked steadily. Inside me, despair gave way to something else, a cold, steady clarity. I was not alone. We parents, who once believed unconditional love was a law of nature, had learned a hard truth. Some children only know how to take, and if they see us as nothing but cash machines, then we have every right to shut the machine off. After hearing the stories of others, I no longer had doubts. Harvey and Evelyn were just like me, parents who had given nearly everything, only to be left with emptiness and betrayal. If I kept silent, I too would end up like them, lying in a hospital bed, watching the very children I called my own strip away what little I had left. That morning, as Carla helped me take another lap down the hallway, I whispered to myself, enough. It's time to take back control. That afternoon, sunlight spilled across the white hospital sheets in my room. On the table sat my cell phone, which Carla had kindly brought from my house. I stared at the screen for a long while. Numbers rolled through my mind like blueprints. Tuition, the apartment, the wedding, the loan for a law office, more than $100,000. A massive bridge I had built for Daniel and Melissa. But instead of bringing us closer, it had turned me into the foundation they walked over. I drew a long breath and dialed. A polished voice answered, "Thank you for calling, Frost Bank. This is Michelle. How may I help you today?" Slowly, but firmly, I said, "My name is Richard Coleman. I need information about canceling the power of attorney I granted my son 2 years ago." There was a brief pause. Then Michelle replied, "Of course, Mr. Coleman. First I'll need to verify your identity." She asked a series of questions. Date of birth, address, the last 4 digits of my account. I answered each one clearly, not missing a detail. The engineer in me had always lived on precision. When you come into the branch, Michelle continued, you'll need photo ID, the original power of attorney, and you'll sign a revocation form. Within 24 hours, all access will be officially removed. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I saw Daniel, standing in that uptown apartment, grinning in his tailored suit beside Melissa, raising a glass like a conquering king, while I, his father, lay tethered to machines, wondering if I would survive the night. All right, I said. I'll come in as soon as I'm able. When I hung up, a current of strength surged through me. My heart was still fragile, my body still weak, but my will was steady. I had taken the first step, pulling control of my money out of the hands of a son who no longer deserved it. That night, I sat by the window overlooking Dallas. The skyline glittered, traffic pulsed like blood through the city's veins. I knew I wasn't free of danger. The heart attack could return, and Daniel would be furious when he found out. Melissa, with her lawyer's ambition, would not let her interests slip away easily. But for the first time in years, I felt I had the advantage. I still held the papers, the accounts, and most of all, my clarity. I told myself, from this day on, I will no longer be a walking wallet. If they want money, they'll have to earn it themselves. That night, sleep did not come easy. My mind conjured scenes of Daniel and Melissa pounding on my door, demanding, accusing, shouting. But instead of fear, I felt steel settling inside me. They had abandoned me at the moment I needed them most. Now it was their turn to feel what it meant to lose the ground beneath their feet. I allowed myself a faint smile as I pulled the blanket over my chest. The resolve had formed. Tomorrow, I would begin again. A fight that this time, I would not lose. After more than a week of recovery, Dr. Price signed my discharge papers. You need to avoid heavy lifting for 6 weeks, take your medication on time, and if you feel chest pain, call EMS immediately, he warned. I nodded, taking the thick packet of instructions with mixed relief and unease. Walking out of the hospital felt like having shackles removed, but also like being dropped back onto a battlefield. Carla, the small nurse with the thin wire glasses, escorted me to the door. Good luck, Mr. Coleman. Remember, you're stronger than you think. I smiled, my hand trembling as I shook hers. Thank you, Carla. Thank you for being kind when I was at my weakest. At the hospital entrance, a white Honda Accord pulled up. The driver, a solid Latino man with salt and pepper hair, stepped out with a warm smile. Mr. Coleman? I'm Miguel. I'm here to take you home to Plano. I nodded, letting him take my small bag before carefully lowering myself into the back seat. The car smelled faintly of coffee and pine from a freshener dangling from the mirror. On the dashboard was a photo of a young man, his son, no doubt. Miguel started the engine, merging into the heavy flow on Greenville Avenue. Heart trouble? He asked casually. Yes, I said. Almost didn't make it. He gave a knowing nod. My father went through it 3 times. Strong man. But the family wasn't always there. I turned, a little surprised. Miguel gave a crooked smile tinged with bitterness. The first time, everyone worried. By the third, my brothers complained about missing work to visit him. Families can be complicated, my friend. His words struck something deep. My son didn't come, I admitted. The doctor called and said I might not make it through the night. He told them he was busy. It was his wife's birthday. Miguel tightened his grip on the wheel. Cruel. I know the feeling. My son's in Los Angeles, doing well. But it's been 5 years since he's come home. He once told me, Dad, don't call too much. It embarrasses me when my colleagues find out my father drives a cab. He gave a short, pained laugh, eyes fixed on the road. It hurt. But eventually I realized, clinging to resentment only cages you. So I started living for myself. Travel, guitar lessons, new friends. I learned family is really the people who show up when you need them, not just the ones who share your blood. His words landed hard. I gazed out the window at the I-30 freeway, cars shimmering in the late afternoon light like a silver river. Uptown was just a few exits away, where Daniel and Melissa enjoyed their luxury apartment. Every inch of it paid, in part, with my sweat. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Blood doesn't always mean family. The car turned off the highway toward Plano. Passing Highland Park, I caught glimpses of grand white houses, perfect lawns, sparkling pools. Daniel and Melissa loved to brag about their invitations to parties there, rubbing shoulders with people who mattered. Me, the man who covered their down payment, was never invited. Finally, the Accord pulled up in front of my modest two-story house. The paint was faded, the roof in need of work, the front yard kept alive by the rose bushes I'd tended since my wife was alive. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Miguel helped with the bag, then waved off a tip. My number's on the card there. If you need groceries, a ride, or just someone to listen, call me. That's what family should do for each other. I stood on the porch, throat tight. A stranger had shown me more of a family's heart than my own son. The door lock clicked under my key, the familiar creak of the hinges welcoming me back. The air smelled stale after a week shut tight, but I breathed it in deeply. This was my world, no one else's to control. I had just set the bag down when the doorbell rang, hard and insistent. Then came the pounding of fists. Through the frosted glass I saw the blurred outlines of two figures. Daniel and Melissa. Daniel's voice thundered. "Dad, open up. We know you're in there." My hand tightened on the doorknob, and I whispered to myself, "So it begins. The real fight starts now." I stood behind the door, listening to the bell ring and the pounding of fists. Each sound echoed in my chest, still sore from the heart attack. I closed my eyes, drew a breath, and turned the lock. Daniel stormed in first, face flushed red, his tie crooked as if he'd left a party in a hurry. Melissa followed close, her business dress rumpled, her usually polished hair now disheveled. "Dad," Daniel nearly shouted, "what did you do? The bank called me this morning, said my access was revoked. Do you realize you're destroying everything?" I shut the door calmly and turned my back to them. I just took back what was mine. Melissa stepped forward, her voice sharp, clipped like a lawyer in court. "Mr. Coleman, this isn't wise. After a heart attack, people can become confused, even paranoid. We've been managing your finances to make sure you're safe. Why would you?" I cut her off, my tone low but steady. "I was lying in a hospital bed, tubes everywhere, and the doctor told you I might not survive the night. Where were you?" "Busy. At a birthday party. Is that your definition of safe?" Silence filled the room for several seconds. The old clock ticked loudly in the background. Daniel's face flickered with hesitation, but Melissa was quick to recover. "You misunderstood," she said briskly. "The doctor told us it wasn't immediately critical. We planned to visit the next morning." I looked her straight in the eye. "Dr. Price made it clear. I might not make it through the night. He called you. And you said, 'Busy.'" Daniel stepped closer, voice hardening. "Dad, you're letting someone manipulate you. You're weak, not thinking clearly. We have a duty to protect your assets from bad decisions." I lowered myself into my worn armchair, the same one I'd bought with overtime pay to cover his tuition. I met their gaze calmly. "Protect my assets? All my life I've paid for your schooling, your home, your debts. I was the bank, and you were endless borrowers. Now I've simply closed the bank. That's not abuse, that's boundaries." Melissa's cheeks flushed. She clutched a folder tight against her chest, took a long breath, then spoke with icy calculation. "If you insist on this, we'll have to go to court. After a heart attack, a judge can declare you incompetent. If that happens, everything you signed will be null and void." The words cut like a blade. But I didn't flinch. I leaned forward, lacing my fingers. So, you've admitted the truth. This isn't about my health. It's about money. That's all it's ever been. Daniel moved closer, towering over me, his voice dropping into a growl. You can't just cut us out. We're family. We have rights. I rose slowly. My body was weak, but I still stood taller than him. I pointed to the door. The only right you have is the right to leave. Now. Immediately. Melissa shot Daniel a burning look, then turned back, her words seething through clenched teeth. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Mr. Coleman. This decision will ruin everything. I opened the door, my hand steady. This door was open to you for decades. Tonight it closes. Go. Before I change my mind. Daniel gripped Melissa's hand, and together they stomped toward the threshold, heels striking the floor like nails hammered into a coffin lid. Just before stepping out, Daniel turned, eyes blazing. You'll regret this. We'll prove you're not competent. We'll take it all back. The door shut hard behind them, the slam reverberating through the house. I stood there, my hand still on the lock, listening as their car engine roared and sped away. In the silence that followed, one truth rang clear. They no longer saw me as a father. To them, I was just a breathing safe. And that safe had just changed the combination. After that confrontation, I knew Daniel and Melissa wouldn't let go easily. What I didn't expect was how quickly they would strike back. Or how shamelessly. 2 days later, I was on the porch, watering the rose bushes my late wife had planted, when my neighbor Linda Johnson walked over. A widow who had lived across from me for more than 10 years, she was usually cheerful. But this time, her face showed hesitation. "Rick," she began, voice uneasy, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but you ought to know." I set down the watering can. "What is it, Linda?" She looked around as if worried someone might overhear. "Melissa came by yesterday. She said you've been forgetful, a little confused since the heart attack. She asked me to keep an eye on you and call them if I noticed anything unusual." A pang hit my chest, not from the bad heart, but from betrayal's sting. I sighed slowly. "And what do you think, Linda? Am I losing my mind?" Her answer was immediate. "Of course not. Just last week you showed me how to get rid of those beetles eating my roses. You're sharper than most men I know. I see what Melissa is trying to do, and it breaks my heart for you." I gave a faint smile. "Thank you, Linda. At least someone around here sees the truth." 2 mornings later, I stopped at my usual coffee shop in Highland Park, where I'd been a Sunday regular for years. Robert Fields, the owner, set my black coffee down, but his eyes were guarded. "Rick," he said softly, "Daniel and Melissa came in here the other night. They told me you've been unstable since the heart attack, that you've been making reckless financial choices. I didn't know what to believe, but I figured you should know." I sipped the bitter coffee, let it sit on my tongue, then looked him square in the eye. "Robert, I paid you $3.75 this morning, exact change. I still remember the Cowboys game last week, and I can tell you the score. Does that sound like a man who's lost his mind?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Number. You're the same as always. They're spinning stories. Just be careful, Rick. They're spreading it around." Robert was right. That afternoon, I went to Frost Bank to tighten my account security. The branch manager, Angela Wu, pulled me aside after we finished the paperwork. "Mr. Coleman," she said quietly, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your daughter-in-law, Melissa, came in yesterday. She asked about the process for obtaining financial guardianship. She wanted to know what kind of medical proof she'd need to show you're no longer capable of managing your money." Cold sweat traced my spine. "Have they filed yet?" "Not yet, just asked questions, but they said they'd be back next week." I nodded, my voice steady though my insides churned. "Thank you, Angela. That's all I need to know." That night, I sat alone in my living room. The old oak table, worn from years of drafting bridge designs, now held something new, a different kind of blueprint. I opened my engineer's notebook and began writing, Daniel and Melissa, spreading rumors of Dad losing his mind. Neighbor, Linda. Coffee shop, Robert. Bank, Angela. Objective: build a community file to support a guardianship case. I underlined the last line, counter strategy required, immediately. The pencil trembled in my hand. Not from weakness, but from anger. They didn't just want money, they wanted my dignity. They wanted to paint me as a senile old man to make their theft legal. I looked up at the picture of my wife on the wall, her gentle smile frozen in time. Don't worry, love, I whispered. This time, I won't let them win. In that moment I understood. This fight was no longer just about dollars. It was about the right to exist as a man, still sharp, still worthy. And I was ready for battle. Sleep wouldn't come. Night after night I lay awake, picturing Daniel and Melissa in my living room, shouting that I was senile, incapable, unfit to manage my own life. And worse, I knew they were planting that same lie with my neighbors, at the coffee shop, even at the bank. If I did nothing, it was only a matter of time before they hauled me into court, paraded me as a confused old man, and stripped me of everything. But I wasn't confused. I was a bridge engineer. I had spent 70 years calculating loads, stress, and resistance. I knew how to make something stand when storms came. And if I wanted to keep my dignity, I needed to build my own structure of defense. On Monday morning, I put on a worn white shirt, buttoned it slowly with unsteady hands, and ordered a ride into downtown Dallas. Rebecca Collins. That was the name an old colleague had given me. She's sharp, and she doesn't play games. If you want to protect your assets from opportunists, find Collins, he said. Her office was in a 14-story glass tower on Main Street, the sunlight of Texas bouncing hard off its polished surface. As I stepped inside, my heart thudded, not from weakness, but from the sense of walking onto a battlefield. The waiting room smelled of polished wood and professionalism. Shelves lined with legal books, every corner tidy. Then she appeared, tall, mid-40s, dark hair cut straight at the shoulders, eyes steady as steel but not unkind. Mr. Coleman, she said with a firm handshake, come in. She led me to a small conference room. On the table sat a pad of paper, a fountain pen, and a small recorder. I want the full story, Rebecca said, calm but direct. So I told her everything. How Daniel left me alone in the hospital, how Melissa spread lies about me losing my mind, how the bank had warned me they were asking about guardianship. I left nothing out. Rebecca listened, jotting notes with quick strokes, her face unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back, fingers steepled. Mr. Coleman, you're dealing with a textbook case of elder financial abuse. They'll try to prove you lack capacity, so the court will hand them control. We need to get ahead of them. How? I asked. First, we secure a statement from your doctor, Dr. Price, declaring you competent. Second, we update your will immediately, cutting them off before they make a move. Third, we do this with neutral witnesses, so they can't claim you were coerced. That's the foundation. I sat quietly for a long moment, then nodded. I want all three, and I want them done now. Rebecca pulled a thick folder from the shelf. Your current will leaves everything to Daniel, correct? Yes, I admitted. After my wife died, I thought it was the simplest way. Not anymore. Then who will inherit? She asked. I stared out the window at the blinding Texas sun. An idea came, sharp and certain. The American Heart Association. They saved me. They'll use the money to save others. Daniel and Melissa will each get $1. Not forgotten, but deliberately left out. Rebecca gave a thin smile. That's clear, and very final. She scribbled notes, then added, we'll bring in 2 of my staff as witnesses. They don't know you. That makes them impartial. Afterward, we'll file the documents with the county to protect the will from challenge. For the first time in weeks, I felt something lift inside me. Not pain, but resolve. I wasn't going to sit and wait for my son to decide my life. Before I left, Rebecca looked at me intently. "Mr. Coleman, I've seen dozens of these cases. Most parents can't bear to fight their children. You're different, you know your worth, and you're standing up. But be ready. They won't back down. They'll fight hard." I gripped my cane firmly. I'm an engineer. I built bridges to withstand storms. Now I'll build walls to keep out leeches, no matter how strong the wind blows. She nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. That evening, back in my modest Plano home, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Attorney Rebecca Collins, plan to revise the will. Dr. Price, statement of competence. Independent witnesses, law office staff." Then, on the next line, I wrote in bold letters, "Begin counterattack." And for the first time since my heart failed, I felt truly alive. Friday morning, the Dallas sun blazed down. I buttoned a pale blue shirt, combed what little gray hair I had left, and studied the man in the mirror. The face looking back was older, worn, but the eyes were steady and clear. Today mattered. Today I would cut the cord I had spent a lifetime tying to Daniel and Melissa. Rebecca Collins's office sat on the 10th floor of a glass building on Main Street. Inside, the air smelled of polish and order. Bookshelves lined, the hum of cool air. This was the world of law, of signatures, of decisions that carried more weight than any party my son or daughter-in-law ever hosted. Rebecca met me with a firm handshake. "Are you ready, Mr. Coleman?" "I've been ready for years," I said, voice raspy but sure. She nodded and led me to a conference room. On the table lay a thick folder with a notary seal, flanked by 2 young staffers, 1 man, 1 woman, brought in as impartial witnesses. Strangers, just as I wanted. Rebecca opened the folder and began to read, her voice even deliberate. "This will states that all assets, including the Plano home, Frost bank accounts, remaining investments, and personal effects, shall pass to the American Heart Association. Daniel Coleman and Melissa Coleman shall each receive $1 to confirm they were not forgotten, but intentionally left with that amount." The room went quiet. I stared at the black and white text. Memories reeled through me. Daniel bursting into the kitchen with his college acceptance letter, Melissa pleading for a loan to start her law practice, the 2 of them moving into that uptown apartment my money helped secure, and then the image that ended it all, me in the ICU, Dr. Price telling them I might not live the night, and Daniel's reply, "Busy, it's Melissa's birthday." My hand trembled as I took the pen. Not from weakness, but from the gravity of what I was about to do. This was the stroke that would change everything. I drew a breath and signed, "Richard Coleman." The letters stretched across the page, steady as the bridges I once drafted. The witnesses signed next, each in turn. Rebecca pressed the notary seal down with a solid thump. "Mr. Coleman," she said, sliding the folder toward me, "this will is now fully legal. It will be filed with the county. No one can claim you acted without capacity." I nodded, feeling as though a stone had rolled off my chest. On the ride home, I looked out at Dallas, glowing in the afternoon sun. The skyline shimmered, traffic surged, but the city felt lighter somehow, as if a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I was no longer a walking wallet for Daniel and Melissa. I was no longer their safety net. I had reclaimed the right to steer my own life. By the time the car turned back toward Plano, a quiet smile crossed my face. Tonight, they would panic when they learned. Tomorrow, they might come pounding at my door, with tears or threats or both, but it was too late. I had left them $1 each, and with that dollar, they could buy themselves a lesson that ingratitude has a price. That evening, sitting alone in my living room, I looked at the picture of my late wife on the shelf. "I did it, love," I whispered. I saved myself, just as I once saved them, time and again. Outside, Texas night fell. But inside me, a light had been switched on. The next afternoon, at exactly 4 o'clock, I picked up the old landline in my living room. The timing was deliberate. Rush hour, when I knew Daniel and Melissa would both be home in their uptown apartment. I wanted them together. I wanted my words, calm, measured, to ring in their ears like a bell tolling for their inheritance. I dialed. My heart beat steady but firm. 4 rings. Then Melissa's voice came on, sharp but coated with practiced charm. "Hello? It's your father." There was a pause. Then her voice brightened with false warmth. "Dad, how are you feeling?" "Better," I said evenly. "And I'm calling to tell you something important. I've changed my will." The silence on the other end was almost physical. I heard a sharp breath, then the rustle of the phone shifting hands. Daniel's voice broke in, urgent. "Dad, what do you mean? Changed?" "Simple," I replied. "Everything. My home, my bank accounts, my investments, now goes to the American Heart Association. You and Melissa will receive $1 each, nothing more." There was a choked sound, Melissa gasping. Then Daniel exploded. "Dad, are you insane? After everything I've done for you?" I cut him off with a dry laugh. "Everything you've done for me? Daniel, I paid your tuition, your wedding, your home, your debts. I carried you when you stumbled, bailed you out when you failed. Tell me, what exactly have you done for me?" The line went dead silent. Melissa recovered first, her tone unsteady but still trying to control the ground. "Mr. Coleman, we should talk face to face. You can't make a decision like this over the phone. We're coming over now." "Suit yourselves," I said, "but the decision won't change," and I set the receiver down with finality. 47 minutes later, the doorbell shrieked. I was ready. I sat in my old armchair, a cold cup of tea beside me, and waited. When I opened the door, Daniel nearly burst through, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Melissa trailed behind, makeup smudged, her dress wrinkled. "Dad," Daniel barked, "tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't sign that madness." I stayed seated, my voice level. "I signed it. With a lawyer, a notary, and witnesses. It's legal." Melissa dropped her purse on the sofa, collapsing into it. Her eyes brimmed, but I knew those weren't tears of family. They were tears of lost money. "Dad," she began softly, slipping into her lawyer's cadence, "this is impulsive. We can prove you lacked capacity. A heart attack of that magnitude. No judge will believe you were of sound mind." I crossed my arms. "Try it. Dr. Price has already signed a statement of competence, and I've documented every lie you've spread. Go ahead. Bring it to court." Daniel leaned down, his face inches from mine, his voice a growl. "You can't treat your own son this way. I'm your blood. I have rights." I rose slowly. Weak body, yes, but still taller than him. My voice cut like steel. "Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. Blood doesn't erase absence. Family shows up when it matters. And you didn't. That night, when I might have died, you chose a birthday party. From that moment, you forfeited every right." The air in the room thickened. Melissa's eyes darted away. Daniel's fists clenched. Finally, I pointed to the door. "Leave. Learn how to live without my help. This is only the beginning." Daniel's teeth ground audibly. "You'll regret this. We'll prove you unfit. We'll take it all back." I opened the door wide, letting the hot Texas sun blaze in. "Try it. But this time, I'm ready." The door slammed behind them with a thunderous crack, like a drum announcing war. I sat back down, hand resting on the cool porcelain of the teacup. My heart ached, but not from weakness. This was no longer defense. The battle had truly begun. The next morning, the Texas sun lit every corner of my quiet Plano street. But inside me another light had turned on, the light of truth finally breaking through. Daniel and Melissa had stormed out last night furious, but I knew they'd be back, and next time, they wouldn't just bring anger. They'd bring arguments, tricks, and lies. This time, I wouldn't let them control the story. That morning, I went to the Highland Park coffee shop, where I'd read the paper for years. Robert Fields, the owner, approached my table with a wary look. "Rick, I've got to be honest," he said. "Daniel and Melissa came here again last night. They told folks you're suffering from memory lapses, that you changed your will in some fit of anger." I set the paper down and met his eyes. "Robert, you've known me for years. Do I seem confused to you?" He shook his head firmly. "Number, you're sharp as ever. They're spinning a story." I nodded and sipped my coffee. Then it's time I told the real story. To everyone. That afternoon, I invited my neighbor, Linda Johnson, over. I spread a thick stack of documents across my oak table. Bank statements, receipts, wire transfers, credit card bills. Records I had kept through the years. "Linda," I said, my voice steady, "Daniel and Melissa will try to prove I've lost my mind. But here's the truth. Every dollar I've spent on them is here. College tuition, wedding costs, apartment deposits, law office startup money, car repairs, all of it. More than $100,000. Linda flipped through the papers, her eyes widening. "Rick, this is staggering. And after all this, they're trying to paint you as incompetent?" "I need you as a witness," I told her. "If it comes to court, I want you to tell what you've seen, that I'm lucid, that I'm a father who sacrificed, and that they're the ones abusing, not me." She reached over, squeezing my hand. "You have my word. Everyone here knows you're sharp. If they try to drag you down, I'll stand beside you." That evening, right on schedule, Daniel and Melissa returned. This time, they brought a man in a gray suit, hair slicked back, carrying a leather briefcase. "I'm Attorney Jeffries," he announced coolly. "I represent Daniel and Melissa. They all sat across from me in my living room." Jeffries opened his folder, his tone polished, detached. "Mr. Coleman, we have evidence you've made irrational financial moves since your heart attack. Revoking powers of attorney, changing your will without consultation. These are clear signs of diminished capacity." I slid my own folder onto the table, pushing it toward him. "Evidence? Here's mine. 15 years' worth of receipts, bank slips, transfers. Every cent I poured into Daniel and Melissa. College, wedding, house, debts, law office. When I was dying in the ICU, they were at a birthday party. That's the truth. Do they deny it?" I turned to face them directly. "Can either of you swear, right here, that Dr. Price never called? That he didn't say, 'I might not survive the night'?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. Melissa's eyes darted, lips pressed tight. Then, I laid another sheet on the table. Dr. Price's signed statement, notarized, confirming I was fully competent and sound of mind. "Here's a medical certification. Try arguing with that." For the first time, Jeffries faltered. His smooth mask cracked. He glanced at them as if to say, "This doesn't look good." I leaned forward, my voice firm. "You say I'm senile, but it's you who are blinded by greed. I taught you that family means showing up when it counts. And when I needed you most, you chose a cake and candles. From that night on, the ledger between us is closed." The silence was heavy, suffocating. Melissa stared at the floor. Daniel's jaw clenched. Finally, Jeffrey snapped his folder shut. "We're leaving." The door slammed behind them, leaving me in the quiet hum of my house. I sat back, exhaling slowly. For the first time, I felt I hadn't just defended myself. I had attacked. I had laid out the truth. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote, "They are cracking. Now their true nature will reveal itself. All I need is patience." Outside, Plano lay under darkness. But in me, the light of truth burned bright, exposing everything. The weeks after that showdown with Attorney Jeffries passed heavy, but clear. I no longer had to guess. Daniel and Melissa had revealed who they truly were. Since that night, they avoided me, but their whispers still circled the neighborhood. I knew they were still plotting to challenge the will. But with every passing day, fewer people believed them. Linda Johnson told me that when Melissa stopped by again, she was met right at the door. I've lived across from Rick for more than 10 years. He's sharper than I am. Don't you dare come around spreading lies. At the coffee shop, Robert laughed as he poured my coffee. Rick, from now on you get the strongest cup I've got. Keep your head sharp and prove nobody's fooling you. The tide had turned. Where once they'd sown suspicion, people now rallied to my side. I wasn't alone anymore. One afternoon, as I was pulling weeds from the front yard, Daniel showed up, alone. No suit, no polished shoes, no BMW gleaming at the curb. His shirt was wrinkled, his face hollow, eyes sunken. "Dad," he rasped. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my hands. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, then said, I'm sorry. These past weeks everything's collapsed. Melissa left. Debt piled up. Friends turned their backs. I don't have anything. I drew in a long breath. The fire of anger I once carried had burned down to ash. What was left was only weariness. "You had everything, Daniel. I gave it to you, and you threw it away. I can't start over for you again." He sank onto the porch steps, burying his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. I just want your forgiveness." I sat beside him, my voice low. "I can forgive you, son, but forgiveness isn't forgetting, and it's not another bailout. You'll have to stand up on your own. If I've left you anything, it's the chance to finally grow up." His eyes lifted, rimmed with red, and he gave a weak nod. Then he walked away, his back bent like a broken beam. Months passed. Autumn came to Dallas, laying the yards in red and gold leaves. My little house in Plano settled back into quiet. No more rumors, no more angry fists on the door, just peace. All the paperwork with Rebecca was finished. The new will filed with the county. Bank accounts locked tight. Legal fences built high and strong, like bridges meant to withstand storms. Miguel, the cab driver who had once carried me home from the hospital, stopped by sometimes with fresh produce, or to strum his guitar on the porch. Linda invited me for supper often. Robert at the cafe always kept a corner table waiting. I realized something simple. Family isn't always blood. Family is the people who show up when you need them. That Thanksgiving night, I sat alone in the living room, gazing out at the quiet street. On the shelf, my wife's photos smiled softly, as if still watching over me. "I kept my word," I whispered. "I didn't let them take my dignity, and at the end, I chose to live for myself." I raised my teacup, listening to the steady tick of the wall clock. No more sterile hospital beeping, no more false alarms. Just the rhythm of an ordinary, peaceful life. My story wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. About a father finally learning to set boundaries. And sometimes, the greatest gift a father can leave behind is knowing when to say, "Enough."